Good morning, viewers, and welcome. Today, we shall start the day with a prayer from Gitanjali, Song Offerings by Rabindranath Tagore. Rabindranath Tagore needs no introduction. When we were in school, we remembered him almost every day when we sang the national anthem at the end of the school assembly. Rabindranath Tagore is a very famous and well-known Indian writer, novelist, playwright, poet, short story writer, very prolific writer and a very versatile artist. He is a painter as well. Gitanjali, a song offerings to God, was published in 1912. It was received the Nobel Prize in the year 1913. It is in the form of prayers to God. Let us read Gitanjali. Let us read Song 36. Indeed, let us offer our prayer to God alongside Tagore. What is Tagore's prayer? Here it is. This is my prayer to Thee, my Lord. Strike at the root of penury in my heart. Give me the strength lightly to bear my joys and sorrows. Give me the strength to make my love fruitful in service. Give me the strength never to disown the poor or bend my knees before insolent might. Give me the strength to raise my mind high above daily trivials. And give me the strength to surrender my strength to Thy will with love. If you notice, this is a very simple song. But it is deceptively simple. It is deceptively simple because the language that is used is very simple, not at all complex, but the ideas conveyed are pregnant with meaning. They are profound philosophical sentiments. Spiritual song that is offered to God as a prayer is what we have before us today. This song, Song 36 from Gitanjali, like all other songs, as we said a couple of minutes ago, is a prayer offered to the Almighty. The poet here appeals to God to strike, to hit hard at the root of poverty in his heart. God, the divine gardener, the poet requests, should weed out the lawn of his heart. The poet prays to God to bestow on him equanimity of mind, to accept both pleasure as well as pain as gifts from God. He must have such strength of character that he is able to place the needs of humanity above his own selfish interests and stand by the poor, never letting people in power arm twist him into renouncing the common good. He wishes to lead his life with such unflinching faith in God that he is not cowed down by the trivial affairs of everyday life, but willingly submits himself to God's will. This is my prayer to thee, my Lord. Strike at the root of penury in my heart. The central theme, the main idea in this line is the poet's prayer to God to remove the poverty. Poverty not in the sense of the world, but poverty of the heart. What is but poverty of the heart? Lack of spiritual strength. That is what is troubling the poet. Make me so strong spiritually that I will be able to face the challenges of life with faith in you and love in my heart. In fact, the image that comes to our mind is that of a woodcutter who hits hard at a tree and uproots it. Here, God, the gardener, the poet wants and wishes and prays to God, the gardener, to weed out the lawn of his heart and to add the manure of grace so that it flowers and these flowers can be offered to God again. So that's why the poet says, strike. Do not be kind, God, to me. Sometimes you have to be cruel to me. You strike very hard, hit hard at the root of my penury. Because in the eyes of the world, one may be very wealthy and affluent, but if one is spiritually not strong, then that person can be considered poor, because all our material possessions, our earthly achievements will one day perish. And what will save us from sorrow, suffering of this life is spiritual strength, which is reflected in the goodness of our heart. That is why the poet says very earnestly that God should remove the root of poverty in his heart. Because if you strike gently, if you do not hit hard, only the surface leaves will go. You have to hit hard so that the entire root can come out. Give me the strength lightly to bear my joys and sorrows. This life is a gift by God. There may be sorrows in it. As part of this life, God may sometimes give us suffering. But because it is suffering, do we end our lives? Do we start hating God? No. If we accept sorrows as part of life and take them lightly, and if we take joys as part of life, give them only that much due that it's only a part of life and it's not the entire life, our heart is always light and there is always place enough for God to stay there. Because life is not just pleasure. It is indeed, someone said, pleasure is an interval between two pains. So if there is pleasure, pain is bound to be there, because life is full of contradictions. It is a mixture it's a blend of opposites. So we cannot say, I want pleasure, but I do not want pain. You cannot say, I want play, but I do not want to work. We should be able to accept both, blend both. Otherwise, what's the fun in life if there is only pleasure all the time? We start ignoring the value of pleasure if it is not punctuated by pain. And that is why pain is as valuable an experience in life as pleasure is. And what else is the prayer of the poet to God? Generally, our prayer to God is like this. What do we generally pray to God for? We say, God, if we are students like you are, we say, God, give me more intelligence so that I get good marks. Once that is over, we say, give me a good job, then give me a good wife or a husband, then give me good children, then give me a house, then give me a car, then etc., 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 all earthly wishes. Wishes for the betterment of life, which is there's no harm even if we ask for it. But what else should we be asking for? The poet tells us, give me the strength lightly to bear my joys and sorrows. He implores God to grant him the strength of mind and heart not to be overly and unduly affected by both joys and sorrows. Let us not cringe under the burden of sorrow or soar at the sight of joy. Let God bless us with equanimity, the ability to accept and respond to both pain and pleasure with the same sense of detachment. Our heart will then be light and it will have room enough for the Lord to reside inside. If otherwise we fill it with so many wishes and joys, there is absolutely no place for God to stay in it. So let it be washed out. Let all the wishes be washed out from the room of this heart so that there is place for God to stay, because the heart is the temple and in which we need to install God. Give me the strength to make my love fruitful in service. The central idea here is expressing love for God in the form of service to others. When we love God, how do we show that love? Because every human being is a manifestation of God Himself. So if you love God, you do not have to go and pray in a temple. You help the people who are suffering. You offer them a need, you offer them a helping hand. You serve the people who are suffering. That is showing your love to God. Duty is God. Work is worship. And how do we worship God? By working for the poor and the needy. Give me the strength to make my love fruitful in service. Now, this is the request of the poet to God. The poet requests God to bestow on him the strength to translate his love for God into service to humanity. Helping fellow human beings is equal to or even more worthy than simply praying to God. And this is more deserving of God's grace than simply uttering prayers or telling beads. As the saying goes, service to man is service to God. In fact, this is a true spirit of prayer, and indeed it is rightly said that the hands that serve are greater than the lips that pray. Some of us, all of us probably are familiar with the Mahabharata, the Mahabhagavata and these epics. And we know sage Vyasa wrote all these great epics. In fact, he's written Ashtadasha, 18 Puranas. And someone went one day to Vyasa and asked him, "O great sage, you have written so many Puranas, epics, great scriptures, great sacred texts. But we are humble people, we cannot make sense of the wisdom that you have embedded in all those sacred texts. Can you tell us in one simple sentence the wisdom that you have stored in all those texts?" Now this is what Vyasa says. Paropakaraya punyaya papaya parapidanaya. What does this mean? It means to help others is punya, that is doing a good deed which deserves God's grace, which is deserving of grace. And what is sin? What is a sin? A sin is that which troubles others, bothering others, being mean to others, reveling in their sorrow is sin. So this is the sum and substance of all the scriptures. So what do we learn? helping others is a way of life that we should adopt as devotees of God, because God loves those who help others, and that is what Tagore here beseeches God to bestow on him. He says, give me the strength to make my love fruitful in service. What is fruitful? What is making something fruitful? Fulfilling it. Something bears fruit, we say. It is meaningful, it is successful. When is my love to you meaningful? I claim that I love God, but I don't help others. That is not correct. Give me the strength never to disown the poor or bend my knees before insolent might. Here, the poet's prayer is double-folded. On the one hand, he wants to help the poor because, as he said in the previous line, he wants to express his love for God by serving others. That's why he says, give me that kind of strength and faith in myself that I never ever forsake the poor. I always fight for their benefit. And on the one hand, yes, let me fight for the poor. On the other hand, let me have the willpower not to yield to the pressure that is put on me by people in power, because it is so easy to succumb to pressure, especially when this pressure comes from very powerful quarters. What does bending the knees imply? When do we bend our knees? We bend our knees when we kneel down. And when do we kneel down? We kneel down in prayer to God. We kneel down before elders as a mark of respect. But sometimes we also kneel down much against our will before people who hold power. That is why the poet says, I do not want to kneel down. I do not want to fall at the feet of the mighty for the fulfillment of my own selfish desires. That's why he prays to God to give him the power of will and the strength of character to resist against repressive commands of people in power. He may be meek, he may be mild, but he does not want to yield to the power of impudent people. Who are insolent people? What does insolence mean? Insolence is excessive pride, being rude to people. And some of us have experienced this at some point or the other. People in power can be very rude to us. Sometimes we might have to sacrifice our self-respect in order to appease them. Now, the poet does not want to appease them. He wants to have the strength of character. He wants to be so strong as not to bend down before their command. Because who is he answerable to? He is answerable to God. He does not mind falling at God's feet. He does not mind bending his knees in prayer to God, but not to fulfill his selfish interests and appease the people in power. He should be able to resist and fight back injustice, even if it is meted out by the mightiest of the people. And for that, we do need a lot of strength of character. Give me the strength to raise my mind high above daily trifles. Life is full of troubles. As we said just a couple of minutes ago, pain is always hiding behind to pounce on us and rob us of the pleasure that we derive from wonderful experiences in life. So what do? We have to take both pain and pleasure, as already said, lightly. Not only that, we have to rise above the trivial things in life, small little issues which do not deserve our attention, which trouble us at the same time very much. Let us not be lost. Let us not be washed down by the triviality of life. Let us rise above the petty issues that bother us. And keep in mind that we are God's children, and if we are God's children, we should resemble Him. Whom do we resemble? Generally, we resemble our parents. Physical features. In our physical features, in our looks, we resemble our parents. Why? Because they are our parents. They are our worldly parents. Who is our real parent? God. If God is our Father, shouldn't we, His children, resemble Him in our character, in our temperament? If God is a loving God, shouldn't we also be loving people so that we can claim to be His children? That is why the poet says, let me rise myself. Let me rise above all the petty issues. Let me rise above the petty issues in life. The poet entreats God to bestow upon him the strength to withstand the troubles and travails of everyday life. Life is indeed full of troubles, petty problems, insignificant issues, a problem here, an issue there. All these can tease us. They can rob us of our peace, of our mental peace. It is faith in God and faith in God alone that can help us surmount the hurdles. That's why the poet says, let me be steadfast in my faith. Let me be a staunch devotee. I'll have the wisdom to accept what is offered to me as a gift from you, O Lord, without complaining. And this idea of submission of one's will to God is expanded and emphasized in the next line as well. And give me the strength to surrender my strength to thy will with love. I want to submit myself, O God, to your will. Let your will be done. Sometimes there may be a clash between what you want me to do and what I want for myself. Because what we want is not always what we love. And what we love is not always what we get. So, if there is a clash like that, let us learn to love what we get and not want to get only that we love. This is where we need to do the balancing act of submitting ourselves to God's will. And when this submission is done out of love and not out of indifference and rejection and antipathy and bitterness, life is much more beautiful, much more simpler, much more rewarding for us, because there is nothing called me or I or my will or my wish. Everything that is offered to us, all the events that happen in our life will be treated as gifts from God. So if we have that kind of absolute submission, that kind of attitude of submission to God, then that our life itself will be an offering to God. That is why the poet says, let thy will be done. Let me have the love, let me have so much of love to accept your will as my will. This is total submission to God's will. The poet here beseeches God to give him the strength to surrender himself totally before God, so that every step of life God guides him and leads him to reach his destiny safely. At times, when we are struck with pain or suffering or unforeseen misfortunes, we cannot but question God's will, because in our limited capacity, we fail to understand the hidden message, the hidden meaning behind the events that occur in our life or that do not occur in our life. Sometimes, just imagine, sometimes you thought that you would get admission into a very good college. You could not. Then what did you tell yourself? Why God? Why did you do it to me? And to me alone. We sometimes feel that God singles us out only for pains, and it's not fair. It's simply not fair, and we struggle to accept God's ways. And we start questioning why He did this to us. But if we wait in patience, we do understand. If not this college, probably God has something better for you in store later. So they say God's ways are mysterious. They're very difficult to understand. But they are marvelous too, if only we wait for His will to lead our life to our destiny. We should submit ourselves to God. Surrender of oneself, when done out of love and not out of fear or hatred, it can be a wonderful experience. Surrender should be total, absolute. In the sense, surrender should mean annihilation of the self, destruction of the self. There is no Dvaita, there is no two there, God and you. You are with God, you are one with God. You should be such a staunch devotee of God that you should think that whatever is happening in your life is God's gift. So if you submit yourself out of love to God's will, it can be such an experience of joy. So annihilation of the self is the ultimate pathway to salvation. Hence, the poet wishes to submit himself willingly to God, and his motto in leading his everyday life should be, O God, let thy will be done.